So, when a crime is reported in Cambodia, what actually happens next? It's not like you just show up in court one day. There's a very specific, structured path that every case follows, and it's all laid out in the country's criminal procedure code. In this explainer, we're going to trace that exact journey, step by step, from the very first report all the way to a final verdict. Let's dive in and see how it all works.
To really get why this code is such a big deal, you just have to look at what the Minister of Justice said when it was introduced back in 2007. He didn't just call it a rulebook. He called it an important instrument for building a modern society. And notice that key phrase he used: peace and safety for business operations. That tells you something really important. A clear, predictable justice system isn't just about punishing criminals. It's seen as absolutely essential for creating the stability that businesses need to have confidence.
Okay, so right from the get-go, before a case even really begins, the code makes this fundamental distinction. It understands that a single crime can actually cause two very different kinds of harm. And because of that, it can trigger two completely different legal actions, each with its own unique goal.
And here's the breakdown. On one hand, you have the criminal action. This is the state, represented by a prosecutor, saying, we as a society need to punish this person for what they did. But on the other hand, you've got the civil action. This one is all about the victim. Their goal is personal. They want to be compensated for the damage and harm they've suffered. Now, both of these can happen in the same court, but you have to remember, their purposes are totally different.
All right, so a crime's been committed. We have this system in place. But how does the legal process actually get started? I mean, who has the power to officially set the wheels of justice in motion?
Well, the main person is the prosecutor. They're the ones who bring a case forward on behalf of the public. But they aren't the only ones. A victim can also kick things off themselves by filing what's called a civil party complaint. And get this, there's also a duty for public officials. Any official who finds out about a serious crime has to report it. It's not really an option.
And that brings us to the people who are first on the ground, the judicial police. The code gives them this very specific title, an auxiliary of the judiciary. Now, that's not just a fancy name. It means they are the very first official link in the entire judicial chain. They're the ones responsible for finding offenders, gathering up the evidence, and taking those first complaints that kickstart the whole process.
So a complaint is in, and the judicial police have done their initial work. Now the case moves into a super critical new phase, the investigation. This is where a simple report starts to transform into a formal case file. And it's also where some very powerful legal figures step in and take charge.
Now, if there's one number you should remember from this whole code, it's 48. 48 hours. The law is crystal clear on this. That's the absolute maximum time the police can hold a suspect on their own. It's a really critical safeguard, right? It's designed to prevent someone from being held forever without reason, and it forces a quick handoff to the prosecutor's office, which officially moves the case to the next level.
This timeline really shows you how that handoff works. So as soon as a suspect is arrested, a clock starts ticking. Before those 48 hours are up, they have to be in front of the prosecutor. The prosecutor then makes a huge decision to charge or not to charge. And if they do press charges for a serious crime, the case doesn't just go straight to trial. No, they have to request a formal investigation, which is then overseen by another key player, the investigating judge.
So who exactly is this prosecutor? Well, according to the code, they're the representative of the public interest. Think about it. They direct the work of the police, they hold the power to officially charge someone with a crime, and they're the one who will ultimately argue the state's case in court. They're basically the engine that drives the whole criminal action forward. And this brings us to a really unique and powerful figure, the investigating judge. Now, this is so important. This is not the judge who will be at the trial. Their job is to be a totally neutral manager of the pretrial investigation. They gather evidence for both sides, they interview everyone involved, and they make these massive decisions like whether someone should be held in pretrial detention. It's a system designed to make sure a case is built properly and impartially before it ever gets to a courtroom.
Okay, once that whole investigation is complete and the file is ready, the case moves to its most public, most dramatic phase, the trial, which happens in what's called the court of first instance.
So let's look at the cast of characters you'll see in the courtroom. You've got the trial judge, who runs the show and makes the final decision. The prosecutor is there, of course, to present the state's case against the accused. Then you have the accused, who's there to defend themselves. And, really importantly, the victim can be there as the civil party, not just as a witness, but actively making their case for compensation.
So when you boil it all down, the trial is trying to answer two fundamental questions. First, is the accused guilty of the crime? And second,
What compensation, if any, does the victim actually deserve? The court's final judgment has to answer both of those questions, dealing with the criminal and the civil actions at the same time.
But hold on. A verdict from that first trial isn't always the end of the story. What if one side, the prosecutor or the accused, believes a mistake was made? Well, the code establishes a clear system of checks and balances, allowing those decisions to be reviewed by higher courts.
This is basically the ladder an appeal has to climb. It starts at that court of first instance. If a party isn't satisfied, they can take it up to the Court of Appeal, which looks at everything again, the facts and the law. The final stop, the top of the ladder, is the Supreme Court. Its job isn't to retry the whole case, but to be the ultimate decider on whether the law was applied correctly. It's a three-tiered system built to ensure consistency.
So as we trace this whole journey, you can really see the code's core promises in action. It lays out a clear, step-by-step process that applies to everybody. It tries to create a balance between the state's incredible power to prosecute and crucial protections for individuals, like that 48-hour custody limit. And in the end, it all circles back to that original goal, to build a framework for justice that supports a peaceful and stable society.
And you know, that really leaves us with this final thought. A procedural code, no matter how well written, is just a blueprint. It's a map that shows the path justice is supposed to follow. But the real story, the one that truly matters, is how those rules are actually applied every single day, and how that application ultimately shapes the reality of justice for a nation and for its people.